Chapter 1. The Fuse. Seeds of Fire in the Middle East, 1945-1996. Before the towers fell, the ground beneath them was already shaking. The roots of 9/11 stretch far beyond the morning of September 11, 2001. They reach into the shadows of global empires, oil diplomacy, and a shifting Islamic identity struggling under Western hegemony. When the Allied forces emerged victorious in 1945, a new world order was drawn not just in Europe, but across the deserts and mosques of the Middle East. Britain and France, formerly imperial custodians of the region, began a slow withdrawal, leaving behind fractured borders, unstable monarchies, and resentful populations. Into that vacuum stepped a new power, the United States. At first, America's engagement was transactional. It centered around one resource: oil. The 1945 meeting between President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Saudi King Abdulaziz aboard the USS Quincy cemented a controversial partnership. America would guarantee security for the Saudi regime, and in return, it would gain stable access to oil. This alliance became a geopolitical pillar, but also a symbolic betrayal to many Arabs who viewed the American presence as another imperial occupation. Simultaneously, the creation of Israel in 1948 triggered seismic resentment throughout the Arab world. Palestinians were displaced. Neighboring Arab nations went to war and lost. The United States' immediate and unwavering recognition of Israel created a diplomatic scar that widened with every conflict, especially during the 1967 Six-Day War, where Israel's decisive victory and territorial expansion ignited pan-Arab rage. This convergence of Western-backed regimes, loss of Palestinian lands, and humiliation in war laid the ideological groundwork for militant Islamism. But the fire hadn't yet found its spark. As Arab nationalism floundered, crushed by coups, dictatorships, and Israeli military dominance, a new movement took root: political Islam. It was a return to Sharia as the answer to corruption, Western meddling, and the failures of secular Arab regimes. Two seminal events in the 1970s supercharged this shift. The 1979 Iranian Revolution stunned the world by toppling a Western-aligned monarchy and replacing it with a Shiite theocracy under Ayatollah Khomeini. Though Sunni and Shiite divides remained deep, the revolution proved that Islam could be a revolutionary force. That same year, Saudi Arabia faced its own internal jihad. Hundreds of extremists led by Juhayman al-Otaibi seized the Grand Mosque in Mecca, demanding the end of the monarchy's un-Islamic rule. Though the uprising was crushed, it terrified the royal family into embracing ultra-conservative Wahhabi doctrine even more tightly, funneling billions into exporting their ideology abroad. Among those influenced by this religious fervor was a young, privileged Saudi named Osama bin Laden. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, it was seen by many Muslims as a direct threat to Islam. In response, the CIA, through Operation Cyclone, funded and armed the Mujahideen, a coalition of Afghan fighters and foreign volunteers. America, in its Cold War tunnel vision, helped create a transnational jihad. Osama bin Laden, then in his early 20s, joined the cause, not as a soldier at first, but as a financier. The son of a billionaire construction magnate with royal ties, Osama used his wealth to support recruitment and logistics for Arab fighters in Afghanistan. He eventually co-founded Maktab al-Khidamat, a precursor to Al-Qaeda, alongside the Palestinian cleric Abdullah Azzam. By the late 1980s, thousands of fighters had passed through Afghan training camps. Victory over the Soviets, and the eventual withdrawal of their forces in 1989, was seen by many as divine vindication. But the aftermath was deadly. The veterans of that war, now radicalized, trained, and bonded by ideology, dispersed across the world like embers in dry grass. Bin Laden, emboldened and spiritually galvanized, would soon take the next step, turning that fire toward the West. The Gulf War changed everything. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, prompting an international response led by the United States. Operation Desert Storm saw American forces, tanks, and aircraft flood the Arabian Peninsula, including Saudi Arabia, home of Islam's two holiest sites. To Osama bin Laden and others in the militant Islamist movement, this was an unforgivable act. infidels on sacred soil. Bin Laden, then residing in Saudi Arabia, offered to defend the kingdom using his Afghan-hardened fighters. The offer was rejected. Instead, the House of Saud welcomed American troops and allowed them to build sprawling bases. Camp Doha in Kuwait, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. This deployment violated a deeply held tenet among puritanical Muslims, the sanctity of Mecca and Medina. In response, bin Laden began to publicly denounce the royal family and the United States, calling the U.S. presence in the Gulf a new crusade. It was the final severing of his ties with the Saudi regime. In 1991, bin Laden was expelled from Saudi Arabia. He relocated to Sudan, where he began to quietly build a new kind of enemy army, one not limited to a single country or battlefield. While in Sudan, Osama bin Laden established business fronts to fund his growing network. These included construction firms, agricultural projects, and even a tannery. But behind the facade, Al-Qaeda, the base, was taking form, not just as an organization, but as a philosophical war machine. What made Al-Qaeda different was its global vision. It wasn't interested in simply fighting national governments. Bin Laden and his inner circle, including Ayman al-Zawahiri, now dreamed of uniting the Muslim Ummah under one caliphate and purging it of Western influence. Throughout the early 1990s, Al-Qaeda operatives trained, plotted, and recruited. They sent fighters to Somalia, where they helped local warlords attack U.S. troops in the Battle of Mogadishu, the infamous Black Hawk Down incident in 1993. Al-Qaeda also built ties with radical cells in Bosnia, Chechnya, Yemen, and the Philippines. That same year, the World Trade Center was bombed for the first time. A truck bomb detonated beneath the North Tower, killing 6 and injuring over 1,000. Though Al-Qaeda's involvement was indirect, the attack was a harbinger of things to come, and a wake-up call that went largely ignored. In 1996, under growing pressure from Sudanese authorities, bin Laden was expelled and relocated to Afghanistan, then controlled by the Taliban. It was in this lawless, barren land that Al-Qaeda would reach maturity. That same year, bin Laden issued his first public fatwa, titled, "Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places." In this fiery manifesto, he accused the United States of plundering Muslim wealth, propping up corrupt Arab regimes, and desecrating holy ground with military bases. He referenced U.S. support for Israel, the sanctions on Iraq that were killing thousands of children, and the perceived moral decay of American culture. This was not just religious rhetoric. It was a formal, strategic declaration, meant to frame future violence as defensive jihad. It marked a chilling transition. Bin Laden was no longer hiding. He was inviting war. Throughout the late 1990s, Al-Qaeda's fingerprints appeared on a growing list of atrocities. The 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed 224 people. The attack on the USS Cole in Yemen in 2000, where 17 American sailors were killed. Foiled plots in Jordan, Bosnia, and the Philippines. Reports from the CIA, FBI, and foreign intelligence warning of an imminent spectacular attack. And yet, America was not looking at the storm forming on the horizon. Bureaucratic silos, interagency rivalries, and a Cold War mentality made the emerging threat of non-state terrorism appear nebulous, even abstract. By the time bin Laden's name made it onto the front pages of American newspapers, he had already completed the blueprint for the most audacious terror attack in modern history. The 9/11 attacks were not born overnight. They were the end result of decades of political betrayal, cultural humiliation, religious revivalism, and Western miscalculation. The seeds of the fire were sown in the deserts of Arabia, watered by war, and cultivated in the training camps of Afghanistan. In 1996, bin Laden told his followers, "America is weak, strike the head of the snake, and the body will fall." The world didn't believe him, but 5 years later he would prove it, one hijacked plane at a time.